Have you ever gone through a moment that just felt like a failure? Something that you did, you were super excited about, and you put in all this energy, all this effort, all this time. You prayed about it, you were super excited about it, but it didn't turn out the way that you wanted. Yeah, I've been there too. Actually, I'm just off the heels of going through something like that in my business. And I thought it would be really fitting to use myself as an example of what I walked myself through and how you can go through a moment that feels like a quote unquote failure and move forward. How do you reframe it? How do you move forward? And all the things. Today's episode is really for if you have maybe a small business or if you had something that felt like a failure in your career or in an area of your life. Maybe it's not catastrophic, it's not huge, but it's something that you need to work through and reframe. That's what today's episode is. But if you are going through a moment that just feels like you've been in it forever, it's something that sets you back and it's been months and months or weeks and weeks and you still can't seem to get over it, then I actually have another resource for you. It's actually I created this free resource. It is basically my step-by-step framework that helps you get over any moments that you feel like you failed, how to overcome that. How do you get past a major setback, a major moment of, again, quote unquote failure, because I don't believe anything is a failure, but how do you move past that with strength? So if you want to get that, it's a free download. All you have to do is go to the link in the show notes and download that resource there. It really is great. It's a journal promptings that really walk you through and help you process it so that you can move forward into the next season. But now let's get into today's episode. We're going over how do you move past a failure? How do you reframe it? How do you process it? And, how do you move forward with something that feels like a failure? Now let's get into it. Number one is you have to name the moment. Let yourself feel it, right? This is a mistake that I made when I originally created this framework. The first time I walked through this framework with myself, it took years. I wish I was joking, but it took years. If you've been listening to this podcast a lot, you've heard me tell the story that which originally created the whole concept, which launched this whole podcast, the idea, the backstory, the journey that I walked through that led to this podcast. I used to work in national news and I had a full-time job. I'm up and up in my career. I had worked in major news for about 5 years and I went to a new startup. And in that role, about a year after I got there, mind you, it was the talk of the town, talk of the industry. It was a really cool role. But a year after I got there, I was let go from that position. I was essentially fired. And for me, I even say it on the very first episode of this podcast, it was devastating. I felt like my identity was taken from me. I felt so hurt. I felt so betrayed. I felt like I had been dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. So it hurt me in such a deep way that it honestly took me out for years, right? And one of the biggest mistakes that I made in that moment was that I didn't let myself feel it, right? I had recently lost my grandma, actually a month and a half before this happened. And so I was already going through a lot of emotions. And one of the things that I did wrong was that I tried to just rush through it, right? I was like, no, I'm on to the next. I'm okay. And I tried to hide it. I tried to not talk to anybody about it. I actually did not talk to any of my colleagues or the people that I knew in the industry. I did whatever I could because I felt so ashamed. I felt so embarrassed that I didn't let myself feel it, right? This also happened a few years later when I was working in another major news network and the show was pulled. The show that we were on we were creating the show, the whole staff was let go because there was a change in the budget and well, the show was not going to go live anymore after months and months of working. And I remember that time was even worse. I tried to zip through it because I felt in the previous time that I stayed stuck in that too long. So I was like, nope, I'm going to get up. I'm going to jump into it. I'm going to do the opposite of what I did that first time. Right. And so that is really dangerous because you don't let yourself feel it. Right. The key is you don't spiritually bypass or productivity rush your pain. Right. Because that's what I tried to do. I was like, nope, I'm going to get a new job. I'm going to talk to the people. I'm going to network. I'm going to do all the things. That's what I did the second time around. And guess what ended up happening a few days later? I was in service at church and I busted down crying. Like the emotions just came out, right? Because I didn't let myself process it in a healthy way. I was trying to avoid it. And guess what? They came out in an embarrassing time. And that's what happens, right? So it also hinders us where we can't really move forward. We can't see clearly if we don't allow ourselves to feel it, right? So disappointment, discouragement, embarrassment, grief, these are all human feelings. They're all 100% normal. So if you went through something like this recently and you're feeling any one of those things, that's normal. Just know that you are okay, that is 100% normal. There's nothing wrong with you. You have to process those feelings. It's actually healthy that you're processing it. It's actually healthy that you're feeling that way. Don't feel ashamed of it. But if you are avoiding this for too long, it delays, if you're avoiding these feelings for too long, it causes delays essentially, right? And that is 100% true. That's what I went through the first time, where I was kind of avoiding it, then drowning in it, and then avoiding it and drowning in it. And it avoided delays, right? I didn't really fully allow myself the full scope of being in it and really accepting it for a long time, for months, right? And, another thought is that you're not weak for feeling down. You're just being honest. And I think that that is so powerful. So, the number one thing that I want to tell you, if you are going through a setback, maybe you started a side business and you thought you were going to launch something and you thought it was going to some kind of way, or you are doing a new project or launched a podcast, or, writing a book, and you thought something was going to go a certain way and it didn't, don't feel bad. It's part of the process. But remember to give yourself space to feel it, because that is the first step. You're lying to yourself if you don't allow that time and really process those emotions before you move on, or you try to move on too quickly. It's not gonna work, because it's gonna all collapse, right? So that is number one. Number two is reflect without shaming yourself. This one is so important. Reflection. I love reflection. As you know, I just last week did this dream call so that the women could reflect on what the year ahead, what type of 2026 they want to have. It was a great call. And I believe that a lot of the women got a lot of clarity, because I think reflection is so powerful. It's so underused. It's something that we need to do more of. And so I love this. Reflect without shaming yourself. The key is, do not punish yourself, right? You have to really be able to reflect in a way when your identity isn't wrapped up in it. It's not that what's wrong with you? Why did you do XYZ thing? Like, you're not going to be beating yourself up when you're reflecting, right? You're going to ask yourself some clean questions that separate you from what happened, right? You are not a failure. You maybe failed, or something quote unquote failed, or, whatever that thing is didn't turn out the way you wanted, but you are not a failure. So separate yourself first. Make sure you do that. But the clean questions you can ask yourself are, what part of it was in my control? Like, what could I have done better? What approach can I take next time, right? If, you can also ask yourself, what wasn't in my control, right? Maybe if, you didn't, your kids were all sick last week and you were doing a Zoom call and it didn't turn out the way you wanted. Well, that's not necessarily your fault. Those were a lot of factors in your personal life that created that situation, right? Or maybe you didn't turn in the project at work to your boss as well as, it didn't turn out the way that you wanted to, but you were sick all last week. These are things that are beyond your control. And sometimes we can't control all the things, right? So what part of it was in your control? What part of it wasn't in your control? Another question to ask yourself is, what would I do differently with what I know now, right? So this is so key and so important. You start reflecting, okay, what went wrong? Where was I weak? Where did I not execute the way that I thought it? Or why did I say this? Or why did I do these things? Really reflect without punishing yourself, without beating yourself up. That is key. But really go into it and see, like, what could I do differently next time around, right? Okay, I sent an email for the first time to my email list and it didn't look great, and I had a typo, or I made this silly mistake. Okay, that's fine, but like, you're gonna ask her, go through these exercises, and what can you do next time to make it better, right? What would you do differently now that you know more, right? Of course, you always have to, growth really requires honesty, right? So do not be harsh with yourself. Just know that this is part of the growing process, right? You're not reviewing this moment to tear yourself down. Absolutely not. You're not removing, you're reviewing this moment to make yourself wiser. How can you become wiser, stronger? How can you go through this, right? Number three is, you have to reframe this. It's not a failure, it's feedback. This one is something that I did last night. It was really helpful for me, actually. So I'm telling you, this is something that I'm living through. I've gone, that I thought was really relevant for this moment. I think so many of us go through this when we are building our businesses, when we are launching a new project, when we're walking in our calling. There's so much effort that we put into something, but things don't always pan out the way that we like the first time, right? So it's not a failure, it's feedback, right? Life is not pass fail, it's learn and adjust. That's another way of saying my favorite quote, which again, I say it all the time, and I hope you've taken it in. I hope you've heard it before. I hope you've internalized it, and I hope you're using it actually. But if you're in a moment like this, please, please, please borrow this, take it, engrave it in your heart. I hope you engrave this in your heart, because this is so helpful. Please take it, please use it as much as you'd like, but it's not either you win or you lose. It's either you win or you learn. That was a statement that I heard about a year after I was let go from the position, or maybe a little under a year. And I remember I went to an event, and a friend, she and her husband did an event, and it was an amazing event. And one of the speakers said that line. He said, in life, it's not either you win or you lose, it's either you win or you learn. And for me, it was like, psh, like that little emoji with the mind being blown. Everything changed for me. I was like, oh my God, everything I've gone through, it's not either you win or you lose, which was my whole perception, my whole concept until that point, which was my late 20s. It's either you win or you learn. And that unlocked and helped me heal in so many ways. So I want you to take it, run with it, internalize it, know that next time you come across something that did not turn out the way that you like, that's okay. You tried your best. You're going to reflect. You're going to say, what was in my control? What wasn't in my control? What can I do differently next time? And just know that you learned. You're wiser for the next time, right? And this is data, right? This is data that you're taking in. This is beta testing, is the way that I like to say it. A lot of people in the business world use that term beta testing, right? Beta testing is when you're trying something out, you're just learning, right? You cannot believe how many times I've heard of people doing all this work before they beta test. They create courses and do these massive like projects, and then it doesn't work for whatever reason because they didn't really beta test it, right? So I've also had a guest on previous years which talk about the power of beta testing. What does that mean? That means test out stuff, do a little bit, test out, and then improve, test it out, improve, test it out, improve. That's what beta testing is, right? And the more you do that, the stronger you become at pivoting, at, if something doesn't work out, it hurts a little bit less because that muscle is getting strengthened, right? Every outcome gives you information you didn't have before, right? This is really important, right? Because so often we think, oh my gosh, I just want everything to be perfect before I launch a thing, or I want everything to be perfect before I take the next step, or before I tell people about it, or XYZ thing, whatever that looks like. But you will never have the information until you take steps, right? And when you take steps, it's inevitable that not everything is gonna, like, you're gonna be wobbly in the beginning, right? You might feel silly if you're new on social media, for example. You know that is something that I don't love social media, right? So it's something that I've been working through, where it's like, yeah, I'm probably gonna suck the first few videos that I do, but that's okay. Everyone, I'm sure, the most famous YouTubers, the biggest influencers on Instagram, when they did their first Instagram videos, they were not great. It rings true for every industry, every person, everyone that is at the top of their game. They were not perfect when they started, right? They seemed kind of silly in the beginning. That's okay. But they got feedback, then they pivoted, they changed it, they fixed what had to be fixed, and then they readjusted, right? And so this is so important. Something else I want you to be careful with this whole concept with reframing is your language, right? You cannot say, I failed. You have to start saying, this outcome taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. Now you're taking away the power from the situation at hand, what makes you feel so bad. And now you're realizing that if you didn't go through that, you wouldn't be able to understand and learn the lesson, because there's a powerful lesson in that. Now you learn, like, oh, I can't do that again because it didn't turn out the way that I wanted, right? So you are being taught something that's powerful, and there's no other way that you would have learned it, right? That's why they say confidence comes through taking action, because you get more confident, though, because you already have the data, you already have information, and now you're just readjusting it, tweaking it, tweaking and tweaking it. That's right. People can stay stagnant without doing anything for years and thinking like they want to do the thing when it's perfect, but that's not how it works. You have to take action, right? Because then you learn stuff, you kind of like fail there, quote unquote fail, and then you adjust and you learn, and that's how you get confident. That's how you get stronger. Right. So, you can ask yourself a question. What did this experience reveal that success wouldn't have? Right. So often we can get caught up with like the highs, the highs, the highs. But the truth is, I've heard this said a million times, and it's so true. The mountaintop will never, ever teach you what the valley will teach you. The valley is where you learn valuable lessons. In those down moments where you failed, where you went through a really hard moment, where you went through a hard moment in your business, in a relationship, in whatever that looks like, that's where you learn. That's where the most growth happens, right? So if you are trying to avoid those moments, that you're doing a disservice to yourself, because they're inevitable, and also they're a valuable part of the process. You will never become the person you are trying to become if you don't walk through those moments, right? Because you'll never learn those powerful lessons that will propel you to the next mountaintop, right? So ask yourself, what did this experience reveal about that success wouldn't have, right? Because that is powerful. Well, I learned this. I learned I can't do it like this. I can't say this, or I should do it this approach, or this was, I need to do whatever. You have the data in your head, and now you have more experience to move forward in the next time, right? Number 4 is Zoom out, you are in great company. What do I mean by this? Well, there's everyone you admire has a failure resume. I love that. I love that phrase that I found because everyone that you admire has a failure resume. I remember when I was walking through my moment of overcoming that when I was let go from that position and I was feeling it. I remember about a year and a half afterwards, I started reading about all these different autobiographies of people that I admired. One of them was Sarah Blakely, and she just talks about, how she wasn't scared of failing. She was so okay with failure, like, her father normalized it for her because it's part of the process. What he knew when he normalized it for her, where he would go around the table and ask everyone, "What did you fail at today?" Which, if you know, when I do interviews with people, when I have guests on, I always ask them the question to kind of break the ice and just get the conversation flowing and knowing it's normal, it's not a big deal. Well, what he did for her was he made her not scared to go out and create a brand, which is known as Spanx today, right? Which is she's created billions through this brand, and it's made such an impact, right, in her industry. And so all that to be said is that everyone that you admire, if it's Oprah, she's had failures. If it's a famous singer, they've had failures. Whoever that person, a politician, a singer, like I said, a reporter, whoever, or maybe someone in your specific field, your niche field, whoever that is, they have had past failures and it's part of their resume, right? People we respect most. The people that we respect most in any area, like I said, are usually the ones who didn't quit, right? So if they didn't quit, that means they just went through a failure here, a failure there, a failure here, a failure here, a failure there. But guess what? If they would have stopped after the first failure, quote unquote, or if they would have stopped after the first setback, they would not be at the top of their industry. They would not be the person that you admire most in that industry. Why? Because they kept going. Other people stop after the first failure or again, quote unquote failure. They stop after those setbacks. They stop, they get discouraged and they stop. That's the difference, right? So they wouldn't even be the person that you admire if they didn't get back up and go through all these moments of quote unquote failure, right? We compare behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. This is so true for all of us in the social media age that we are in, that we see highlight reels, we see stories on people's IG accounts that we follow, and then we see, wow, they had whatever that looks like, whatever, whether it's in our personal life, in our family life, our friend life, in our careers, in our businesses, we see all these cool things happening for other people. But we never see those sad moments. Or some people do show a little bit of those sad moments, but they don't show all of it, right? So don't compare your behind the scenes with someone else's highlight reel because it's a lie, it's a disservice, and you're just going to discourage yourself. And failure doesn't disqualify you, it often qualifies you. I've never met an incredible leader that is admirable, that has depth, that has, all those qualities that we look for in a leader and we look for in a true solid leader. I've never found that in anyone that hasn't gone through pain, that hasn't gone through these moments of failure where they felt distraught, they felt that, they wanted to give up. But the difference is they pushed through and then their character was developed and then they became the person that you admire today, right? So there's something so powerful about that. If this disqualifies you, you wouldn't feel the pull to keep going, right? So if this disqualified you, you wouldn't feel the pull to keep going. And I think that that is so true. I think you can be discouraged. That's 100% okay. But you should not let that completely take you out, right? Because this doesn't disqualify you. This actually qualifies you to be a stronger leader in whatever that thing is in the future. Number 5 is surrender to God. This is probably the most important one. Number 5 is surrender to God and renew your mind, right? Release the weight you were never meant to carry alone. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving it over, right? It's giving it over to God. It's surrendering the thing like, "Ugh, I didn't like this. I don't like this. This hurts. This is painful. I'm embarrassed. I wish I would have done things better. I wanted a different outcome. I thought things were going to turn out differently." It's all those things where you have all those feelings, all those thoughts, but you're surrendering it to God. You're giving it to him, right? You're inviting him into the situation, right? You're inviting him into the disappointment. You're inviting him into the confusion. You're inviting him into the next step. God, lead me. Give me wisdom to lead your people. Give me wisdom to do this thing that you've put on my heart, to launch this business, this service-based business that I feel is needed in my town. Give me the wisdom to help the children that I feel I'm supposed to help. Whatever that looks like, ask him to renew your mind where disappointment has taken root, because disappointment and discouragement, all these things are attacks from the enemy that just want to sabotage your future. It's to derail you. It's so you don't walk in your purpose and your calling, right? And so the prayer you can say is, God, I give you this outcome, right? This hurt and this fear. Help me to see what you see. Renew my mind, strengthen my heart, order my next steps. I think that is a very simple and clear prayer that you can say at any time and just surrender to God. Spend some time. If you got to cry, cry it out. If you got to journal, put on some worship music, do that. Do whatever you can to really get it out of your heart and really where you really feel like you surrendered and gave it to God. And you're going to feel so, so, so much better after this. Again, if if you are going through a moment where you're walking through a failure, something that felt catastrophic, something that felt so heavy and it feels so deep and it's really maybe shook your identity, shook you in a more deep way, then you know that you're not alone, you're not behind, you know that you're not broken, you're not the only one, you're not done. You have a beautiful, beautiful future ahead. And I just hope that if you are feeling that way, you receive that. But secondly, please go take that free resource that I put in the show notes. Go to the bottom show notes, sign up there, then you get this free resource. And I really walk you through my framework of how do you overcome failure. It's different journal prompts and all. It's a 4 point framework that has multiple points within it and then multiple questions that will really have you journaling and walking through it. I'll also link the episodes that I did for that episode in the past so that you can also listen to, more at length to what I'm talking about as I do as you go through the different sections. But yeah, I hope you do that and I hope that's very helpful, you know, and I hope to see you next time.